Hello, and thank you for joining us. Today we are discussing education, specifically what are we learning? And joining me is Trini Boy Juicy, soca artist, Notting Hill Carnival ambassador, and teacher Juicy. What's going on?
I'm good. Pleasant good evening, good night, good morning, wherever you are in the world, because we're assuming this is going to go everywhere. I'm good, and I'm glad that we're here in this forum to discuss what the topic is, which is what are we learning. So I look forward to this.
Amazing. Joining us is Lewis, Youth and Education. That is his forte. He'll talk to us a little bit about Revolution Hive, I'm hoping. Hi, Lewis. How are you?
I'm good. I'm excited. I mean, this has been in the pipeline for a little while. I'm grateful to be in the presence of two powerhouses, and we've got another one joining us shortly. So I'm excited, man.
Yes, joining us, Mr. Laws, aka Kieran.
Hey, how you guys doing? All right.
Hi, Kieran. 100 Black Men. How are you?
I'm good. I'm excited. Spit some knowledge now. I'm excited.
Yeah, I'm definitely excited as well. So, guys, it's not the first time we're doing it. Slightly different format. Last time we were talking about Black Lives Matter and what was on our heart to speak about. Today we're focusing on education. I know the three of you have way more experience in that industry. Talk to us a little bit about what you are seeing in education now, what you like about it, and what some of the issues we're facing, specifically as Black children in the schooling system in the UK.
Who's going to start?
You want to kick us off? Go ahead, Trini.
I mean, for me, I'm a qualified secondary school teacher. So I've been teaching for 7 years, working within the educational system. So I've worked in secondary school, colleges, but my main focus was when I went into the schools is to work within the behavioral department. So working with the kids who they deemed as difficult behavior or not engaging with their work. So I guess my passion actually came from my own experience in school, where I would say, mentally abused from teachers, being told certain comments, and that kind of ignited that flame in me to go and say, well, when I finished my educational journey is to go into the schools and be that extra voice of opinion, support, but also try to get them to engage with education. And sometimes it's not through using the formal approach that they use, but using alternative ways of, reaching out to these kids. So yeah, that's kind of where I stem from, and my kind of knowledge and background.
I feel like you've had some unconventional success with the behaviorally challenged, and we'll get into that a little bit more. But Lewis, why don't you talk to us a little bit?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, so within education specifically today, so I co-run a social enterprise called Revolution Hive, where our mission is to equip young people for life beyond the classroom. So that sees us focusing on three main areas, which are personal development, social responsibility, and global citizenship. But, if we were going to talk about this topic of what are we learning, technically, Revolution Hive shouldn't have to exist. And that's the be all and end all of it. And I think one of the things that is sometimes overlooked when you're in the world of, say, social enterprise or charity or anything like that is that you're trying to tackle an issue so that you're effectively working yourself out of a job. And so by rights, although as much as I love what I do, I shouldn't have to do what I do. Why? Because in an ideal world, the curriculum, the delivery of that curriculum and the focus of education would already be more holistic in nature. It would already be more rounded in nature. we wouldn't have to be going in to try and teach students about how to develop self-confidence and motivation and resilience, and then teaching them about how politics and democracy works and gender stereotypes and how to manage money, and then thinking about things like racism and climate change and poverty, because that would be embedded into what they learn. But unfortunately, a lot of what we do is very much an afterthought, and we'll expand on that a little bit more. But I always say that, you know, schools have an expectation that they have to cover some form of PSHE or citizenship work, but the level of accountability to which they have to do that is so minimal that they can get away with literally doing the bare minimum and kind of just seeing it as a tick box exercise, which really tells you then, how committed are you to the development of young people for a life where they can go about truly contributing and, if possible, changing the society that we live in? So it's questionable.
Questionable at least. Kieran, talk to us a little bit about 100 Black Men, what you're doing to kind of help out with the lack in education.
Yeah, well, obviously, I work with Lewis and 100 Black Men. We're a charity organization who teaches, you know, our young kings and queens things that you're not really necessarily taught in schools. One of our topics, but basically like self-identity and all these kind of things. And I think it's very imperative with our young kings and queens these days. And you know, talking about the educational system, for me personally, I think it just needs to change all-roundedly. Like, for example, the educational system is only teaching our young kids, they're valued by a grade. Like between 5 and 18, ages of 5 and 18, you're only valued by a grade. And I think that needs to change. And I think the stuff that we're doing, 100 Black Men, and, you know, you and Trini Boy Juicy, we're actually going into these schools and trying to change the way that the educational system are teaching our young kings and queens.
And it's fantastic. I know there's quite a few kind of supplemental programs that are trying to bolster the education system. So let's just talk a little bit about how it's faulted at present, because I'm of the firm opinion, I'm not an educator, but I'm of the firm opinion that schooling is just part of the capitalist cycle. They essentially, what people are learning or were learning in 1850 at ages 10 and 11 is now considered a college level education. They've stretched it out over a span of years in order to separate young people from their parents, who might pass on some of the knowledge, some of the history, some of the truth of what's actually going on in the world. And then they take them into the schools, and what do they learn? What are we actually learning?
Well, that is the question. What are we learning? And it's interesting you say that, because, you know, I'm sure you can expand on this as well, Rihanna, in regards to the history of the education system. But if we're going to go all the way back in a number of different societies around the world, but definitely in this country, the history of the education system was that it was only people from elite families that were being educated. But obviously education was something that was more significant in a religious setting anyway. Then there was a period of time where effectively education was seen as a nannying service. Do you get what I'm saying? That's what it ended up becoming to some extent. But I think when you consider what you've just said, and then you combine that with the fact that actually the only reason as to why an aggressive implementation of trying to give more access to education is ever done in any society around the world is when that country deems the people that in that country as effective for the labor force. Therefore, meaning your focus is not on the way in which that individual person within education goes about being able to live a fruitful and prosperous life. Your focus is on, we just want them to be able to go into the labor force so they can contribute to our economy. Hence why you rightly said it's an opportunity to use them for capitalism. And so what you therefore get then is an approach to education that's so limited and so narrow that basically you're just saying to this young person, listen, we're just here to give you some information so you can become part of this cog in our machine. Not saying, as Kieran and Trini have both rightly said already, that who are you? Who are you? What do you see yourself as being able to do in this world? Do you know what I'm saying? And so then when you add on top of that the introduction of league tables, and I'm probably going to mess up the decade, but I want to say the 50s, when you add on top of that the fact of league tables and schools being financially rewarded for their ability to get students to be able to pass exams to a certain percentage, and then schools are financially rewarded for that. Now, where's the schools going to focus even more? It's solely on academic success. So that's, and funny thing is, that's one part of the reason as to why the overall system is flawed. But I'm sure we'll talk more about it in the next 45 minutes to 50 minutes or so.
Yeah, we only have a limited amount of time, but trust me, we could go all day discussing how broken the school system is. Kieran.
Yeah, like for me, like don't get me wrong, like with the educational system, some teachers actually do care about their students, but how I see it is like when you think about it now, when you think it in nursery and in reception, those 2 years you're very creative. So they're doing painting, they're doing drawings, they're doing anything they want to do, they're being very creative. But when they get to say that year 1, year 2, year 3, they're getting taught the same. And this has been going on for about what, 50, 60 years. How are we having the same educational system for the past 50, 60 years? What that shows me is we're basically telling everyone to be like everybody else. So someone that could have been a saxophone player or anything like that is now a banker, because as Lewis rightly said, you just want them to be like everybody else. That has to change. And within the education system as well, like we got to think about like who's actually training and teaching our teachers to deliver the curriculum. You know what I'm saying? Like because at the end of the day, they're going to have a subconscious bias as well. Especially to those black kids, they're going to have a subconscious bias. So who's actually training these teachers? What, they think they can go to university and then teach a class? No, because at the end of the day, some people are different learners. So scientifically, you've got the left side of the brain, you've got the right side of the brain. Therefore, you've got the auditory learners and you've got the visual learners. You've got to teach them differently, not just how, you know what I'm saying? So I think everything has got to change. And, you're teaching me is like, when you think about it now, you've got Pythagoras theory. Like, who's using Pythagoras theory now? You know what I'm saying? They're not teaching us about no life skills. They're not teaching us about meditation. They're not teaching us about finding out credit scores and everything that's going to like life skills. They need to be teaching us things like this. But at the end of the day, they're teaching Pythagoras theory. Like, really? You know what I'm saying? So that's my take on it. I don't know what Trini has to say about that, because I see him shaking his head.
Let's move on to Trini. I just really want to highlight what Kieran was saying. This isn't about the teachers. I feel like there are really good teachers, and a lot of them, I feel like once they actually get into the system of teaching, start to lose a little bit of their passion, because they come in wanting to help these children, and then they realize they have to follow this set of rigid rules that isn't actually helping the children at all.
Yeah, and just to interject as well, in what both yourself and Karen said, for me, that was the important aspect. That was the drawing point, I guess, for me, was in a lot of the institutions, educational institutions, there are teachers, but they're not the majority. They're mostly the minority of teachers who actually focus is on developing that kid. A lot of the times to the demands of the work now, because of Ofsteds and what that particular institution requirements might be in regards to grades. So a lot of the teachers are now finding themselves marking and focusing on more the marking and the delivering of the lesson, rather than focusing on the individual, or trying to build on certain skills or tools that child may need. So a lot of the times, the more intelligent kids who are deemed as the high achievers are the focal points, and who they would more gauge their time in, whereas the ones who might be the underachievers or may not be engaging with classes, they're kind of pushed away, and then they're pushed into an area where you have the behavioral needs. So the ones who are not engaging with their work, and why they're not engaging in class, and they're disruptive, and so what I would suggest, as working in that field, we must say there are good teachers out there, but we need to have more of these individuals who are not just first class degree holders, but people who are first class teachers and understand the role of their of what they're doing. To be a teacher is not about to tell somebody they're right and wrong, but it's to open their mind to make their own decisions, and in opening their mind to understand what it is they're doing. You understand? So I guess for me, just to elaborate on the point, within the educational system, these are the things that needs to be changed. And more support to the black males. I'm speaking specifically. I think we get a hard time in school. Just to give you a dosage of what I'm speaking about is, I remember, year 8, my teacher, one of the teachers in school, told me, I'm gonna take your guts and feed it to my dog. And like in year 8, how you could tell me that as a year 8? But the difference between me and my peers is that in year 8, I was touring with Billy Ocean. I was all over, so I understood who I was as an individual. Whereas some of my friends, they kind of resorted to accepting that they're not going to achieve and they're not going to make it, and they ended up making that a reality. So yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if Rihanna wanted to say something in regards to the great facilitation she's doing of the conversation, but if it's okay, Rihanna, I just wanted to actually add to something that's been mentioned already about the fact that I was on a call recently with a number of significant stakeholders from across the education sector. So on this particular call, it was being facilitated by an organization called Step Up to Serve, which has been a 7-year campaign all about trying to get young people to do social action, which is something to comment on in itself. But anyway, within this particular Education Advisory Council, they had people from the Education Endowment Foundation, Careers Enterprise Company, Ofsted, the Association of Colleges, the Chartered College of Teaching, Teach First, the National Citizen Service, all these different places. And the woman who was chairing the call was talking about the fact that, the biggest issue we have, because on that day we were actually discussing, racial injustice in the education system due to the whole talk about Black Lives Matter. And she was saying, only 22% of Teach Firsters are BAME, innit? And I was like, okay, first of all, we need to address the fact that if we're going to be here to talk about Black Lives Matter, we're not talking BAME, we're talking about Black people. BAME, you're trying to group in everybody's experience in one thing. That's not how this works. Second of all, and she said, and only 4% of head teachers are BAME. The issue is not necessarily just the numbers, though. What I had to raise in that meeting was the fact that it doesn't matter how many of them are of what particular ethnic background. Obviously, that plays a part. But as Kieran said, as Trini said, what are they learning when they are taught to progress in the profession? Because you can put a Black teacher on an accelerated pathway to leadership, but if what they have to then learn and abide by is still institutionally racist, non-progressive, doesn't help for students to be able to actually think about what they want to be able to do in their lives based on who they are, what does it matter that they're there? Because there's a difference, because to me, effectively, they still not got equity. You might say there's more representation, but if they haven't got equity and can therefore actually go about transforming the system itself, it's flawed. So I will give you an example. I'm not going to say her name because I don't want to put her job on the line, but off the back of that meeting I'm talking about, a woman from Ofsted, she was very open in that meeting and she kept it all the way 100 with me, innit? And I said, let's have a chat in it. So we had a chat earlier this week. And she blatantly just said to me, listen, as Ofsted, our hiring strategy is that we hire ex-head teachers. Hence why 90% of our staff force, both internally and in terms of the number of people that are inspectors, are what? Old white men. So how can we talk about trying to have representation when Ofsted, who technically are not the Department for Education, Ofsted do a job that the Department for Education tells them to do. But if Ofsted as inspectors are entrenched with unconscious bias, and obviously not all just unconscious, some of it is bias in itself, and schools are worried about trying to meet Ofsted standards, schools are only ever going to meet the standards of an organization that's already institutionally flawed. So now you have to think about, like, who are the stakeholders that are guiding them? So if the schools are being guided by an institution that's flawed, the schools are going to continue to be flawed. The colleges will continue to be flawed. So it's deeper than that, because now when I then talk about how teachers are going about being trained, if they're being trained in such a way, and I can tell you this firsthand because my girlfriend is a teacher and she's currently doing so she's already teaching, but she's now not formally doing her teacher training. And sometimes I look at the assignments that she has to do and I think to myself, like, you lot are still quoting theories from 1920, 1950, and don't get me wrong, certain things in life stand true in it. Like, I'm big on personality assessment, the DISC assessment. I think it still holds weight today. That was made in the 1920s. I hear that. But if that's how she's being trained in 2020, but to go into education and what they classify in her assignments as a creative and innovative approach is an approach that's being used since the 50s. How innovative is that really? Let's be honest. Because a lot's happened since 1950. So innovation to me is not something that was started 70 years ago. So it really does beg the question of, like, how many parts of this system are we really willing to address? Because as you guys have rightly said, there's some amazing teachers, but if the teachers are then made to fit in a box, they're always going to make students fit in the same box. So,
guys, I just wanted to say we had a comment that's come up saying that if schools are poorly funded, they won't be able to attract highly skilled teachers, and that combined with large classrooms, it results in poor standards of education. I just wanted to address that really quickly. It doesn't matter how much money you push at this problem, because the curriculum is set from the top. The government has a monopoly on schooling. They've made it illegal for you to keep your child at home without registering them as homeschooled. And we all know the government is funded by capitalists. So they want them to stay as dumb as possible so they can get their labor for as cheap as possible. And that's how the system started. There's lots of trinkets and bells that we put on top, but at the core of it, John Taylor Gatto summarizes it in his book, Dumbing Us Down, one of my favorite books, in 7 lessons that they teach in school. And the first one is confusion. He says that they teach so many subjects to primary school students that they're taught basically that nothing is connected. I'm telling you this fact and you're supposed to accept it. I'm not going to explain to you how they got to this fact. I'm not going to explain where they're going or how the world's catching up. You just need to accept whatever it is that I tell you. And the moment that I say stop, you go to the next class and you get more things thrown at you. And that's just the first of 7 lessons.
Just to go to the back of that as well, like, I think you're right, Rihanna. And the thing is, with the educational system, they're not really teaching you anything. All they're teaching you is just facts. They're only teaching you facts. They're not telling you anything else. And I think what the educational system is sort of indoctrination as well as quarantining them as well. Because they're not, then what are they actually teaching us? And when you're coming with the grades and everything like that, it's teaching them to compare themselves with somebody else. Now, I think I have to applaud Lewis for this, because his company, Revolution Hive, what they do is, and I think it's very imperative for our kids as well, especially our Black kids, is I think what they do is they tackle the student's mind. So, for example, what they do is, what's your core values? What do you like doing? And how can you monetize it? So when you think about like today, 2020, 30% of jobs have not been created yet. Now, if you can tap into your intuitive mind and say to yourself, you know what, I like doing this, how can I monetize it? What that does to the educational system, people are not going to go to universities no more. So therefore, they're not going to get no money. Do you know what I'm saying? So if we go in and teach them what actually you like doing and how you can monetize it, and the thing, you can do anything you want to do. You can be so creative. And that's what the teachers or the government are not teaching our young kids. So someone likes music. Okay, so what are you going to do? How are you going to monetize it? No more universities. You know what I'm saying?
Simple.
You heard it here first, people. You heard it here first.
No more universities. And that's what they're teaching. So I just think it's like we're saying all these issues. I get it. But then again, what's the solutions for this? And this is what we've got to see to the public as well. Everyone listening, what's the solution for this? Because, you know, at the end of the day, I don't think, because of the educational system, it's not teaching in a sociocratic way. So it's like there's levels to this. So when we go into these educational systems now, what can we do for ourselves? What can we actually do? What are we going to go into the system, or what are we going to go into the college and actually do? So Lewis, he goes into Revolution Hive, he goes into different schools around the UK, and he spits these knowledge. What are we going to do? That's what I want to hear.
Yeah, I definitely think we need to start discussing solutions. But obviously, we have been talking about this for a while. I don't feel like the audience really grasps just how damaging the curriculum currently is. Like we've just scratched the surface, so to speak. But you touched on it with the grades and assigning people numbers. Like they teach children to value numbers, and if your grades drop, all of a sudden you're a lesser pupil or you have less favor with the teacher. But if they go up, then you have a chance of moving to a higher class. And it's the higher class. It translates exactly into society. If you want to move up in class, you have to do exactly what we say and improve your numbers. And that's what they're trying to teach them. But so many self-made millionaires and billionaires are dropouts.
Yeah.
And that's because they see it. Even these behaviorally challenged students, a lot of them just see it and they're like, no, I need something to actually stimulate my mind. I don't want to sit here and have you fill me up with empty facts, because more time they don't even know what they're teaching.
Do you know what? I'm interested to know what Trini thinks, because he works with. He's passionate. No, the reason I say it is because Rihanna spoke about those that are behaviorally challenged, but I think especially because of just how creative you are, bro, especially considering you're also an artist, I'm sure you found some phenomenal creative interventions that you've been able to use with those students, who I'm sure many other people who've given up on them, let's say, because of the fact that they don't meet the standard that the school's looking for. Suddenly you put in place a creative intervention, you've probably seen things. So I'd love to hear a bit more about that.
You know, is that was actually like one of my motivations when I went to university. So I was given a scholarship. I went to university in Leicester and studied performing arts. Because I wanted to use performing arts as an alternative way to engage the black male in education. For me, what I think stood out, and you know, a lot of the times we tend to we being black in the education system, we face a lot of negative stereotypes from the jump, you know. This whole keeping of records of you, like your behavioral records from primary school up to secondary school. I think all of that hinders, you know, a lot of kids. So we already face a downpour from the time we enter secondary school if we have a behavioral record. Um, in regards to the arts, I think one thing I've noticed is, you know, being an artist, you're able to tap into different ways of communicating. So some people, as you mentioned, some people from viewing, from speech, from, you know, so I tend to use those various approaches in school. One of the things which we fail to do, and I mean, I've seen a lot of teachers fail to do, is to take control. You know, and what I mean by that is a lot of teachers are intimidated or very timid. You know, they don't understand their worth in the importance of their role. You understand what I mean? Like, especially in a classroom. So a lot of these kids nowadays, they could tell from the time you walk into a room, they could watch you and say, "Boy, is a cover teacher," or "Yeah, man, we go get a free lesson."
Yeah.
These kids are very socially aware. So for me, it's a lot of the times when I engage with the kids, I engage with them one by one. I empower the ones who they would deem as the troublemakers and give them power. I say, you know what? I'm giving you responsibility. I want you to take your register down to reception. People are like, nah, don't do that, sir, don't do that. He won't come back in time. You know, and I'm like, no, he will come back in time because he understands the importance of his role. So for me, it's always about being an artist, about using your creativeness in a way where you're empowering people, you know, and showing them their worth. That's what it is. It's just about worth. Once you understand your worth and you as a being, the opportunities is endless. You know what I mean? Because you feel you could do anything. You know, when you leave this class, sometimes they feel they're scientists. If it's science or teaching, they're like, "Wait, yeah, I smashed this, sir. Yeah." And I'm like, you know, it's good to see that confidence. You know what I mean? So I definitely think it's about the being realistic, for one, being realistic. A lot of the teachers they follow the book so much that they're plastic in regards to their emotion. It's not real. You know what I mean? It's not genuine. So I guess being real, being realistic, and understanding the importance of your role. You as a teacher, you have to empower. You know what I mean? You know, so yeah, just to like.
No, that's huge, bro. Because I was gonna actually speak to what you spoke about, Rihanna, because you introduced something that I really hope you continue to talk about throughout this, because I think when you brought the 7 points to us from that particular piece of literature that I thought was so significant, and I hope that the audience understand it as well. That first point of confusion and the lack of interconnected nature that is delivered when teachers teach, and that's not to say that they are choosing to do it this way, but that's how they are guided to go about teaching. I think it's interesting because speaking about personal experience, I didn't think I had a massive love necessarily for academia. But then weirdly, when I started to see the interconnected nature of like how, because obviously I was lucky enough to be able to do triple science. I started deep in, like, so I love football, yeah, but now that I'm starting to learn about nutrition, I need to understand how my body digests food. So now suddenly biology became a bit more important to me. But then I had to understand how chemistry came into that, because then I had to understand how different chemical reactions were taking place in my body to make certain things happen. Then I started to deep how significant physics was when you think about even down to things like biomechanics and like, all right, but my body's going to do this when I'm on the football pitch. So, and then I started to actually think about, right, okay, so this does connect to, and it was like, if things are able to be made relevant to us and that interconnected nature can be taught, then you understand how it relates. So you spoke about at the start of the call, Rihanna, there are things that were being taught at the ages of 10 and 11 that are now being stretched out until people are in college, right? So effectively, that means that we have the cognitive ability as people to be able to make sense of information that's relevant to the workplace as young as 10 and 11.
It takes 100 hours to learn the basics of English, math, arithmetic.
There we go. And
that's it, 100 hours.
And that's what I'm saying. So you can achieve that quite quickly. Therefore, meaning, yeah, that if people as young as 10 and 11 are able to understand what is required to succeed in a profession based on that logic, that means that you should start to be able to bring into play real life scenario. In fact, forget it. Let me just share with you my vision. My vision is
Yes, because someone said, how can the entire system be transformed?
I have a vision
go for it.
for education where there is no school. How it works is there's school, but there's no building. So literally, there's about 190 days of school delivery each academic year, yeah? So what you do is you reach out to 190 different companies and you say to them, listen, I want you to host my students for 1 day in the year. And everything that the students learn about the same subjects they would have learned in school, they learn it on the job, in the workplace, being exposed to it. Yeah. So every single day is delivered at a different company. That's how I want it. So then now when you leave school, I need you to know about every single possible sector and industry that exists in society. So you understand how everything in society comes together to work, which means you can also understand where there are issues in wider society beyond just the education system. But you've been exposed to so much. And this word cultural capital that keeps coming up, you've built the cultural capital because you've been exposed to so many things. If you do that every single 190 days times by 5 from year 7 to year 11, it's a different thing. But they will never do that.
No, sorry. It sounds radical, but it's so feasible. And the thing is, because of our generation, we have smartphones. If you showed a smartphone to a caveman, he couldn't comprehend how that would even be possible. So I think for us, a lot of things seem more tangible, and it's on us to kind of bridge the gap for the young people so that they know it's attainable. And then for the older generation, that might feel like they've given up on the dream of having it transformed. And this is not, I'm not going to generalize and say that everyone older and everyone younger is like that. Obviously, we have crossover, but at the core, education, and John Taylor Gatto touches on this as well, there's nowhere else in the world that you will see people segregated by age the way that they are in school. That leaves students literally only thinking about that 1 year, that one point. They're only thinking about the present. They don't think about where they've come from or their history. They're not thinking about their future, where they're going to. The teacher keeps telling them, oh, if you get good grades, you'll get a good job. They've kept them on the cusp of wait for me to tell you what to do next. And it's ridiculous. And he also, because he's a teacher, award-winning teacher, and John Taylor Gatto, when one of his students would misbehave, he would actually send them on an assignment similar to that. So one girl on a school trip littered on the beach, and the next week he sent her and her mother up to the police chief of that district's office to make a public apology for littering. And then she also got to do like a 1-day apprenticeship. Completely transformed her appreciation for the beaches, the people who patrol them, all the work that he's doing. And this is just 1 day. And again, Richard Branson, sorry, last point. Richard Branson, I'm going to paraphrase, but in his book, he highlights that when he was, I think, 4 years old, his mother said to him, do you think you can find your way home from here? Yeah, and she left him. And he found his way home. But he said that nothing else in life felt difficult after that experience. People learn by experience, not just you spitting facts at them and telling them to memorize it. It's ridiculous.
Rihanna, I think you touched on something earlier about like the different generations. And I think that's very important for the younger generation now, because for me, when you think about it now, with the generation now, there's different generations of thinking. For me, I've got my grandmother, I've got my mother, and I've got me. Okay, so my grandmother told my mom to do something. She needs to be a nurse. She needs to be this. She needs to be that. And my mom said to me, "Okay, when you need to do this, you need to do that." There's different generations of thinking. So when we're actually delivering it to us, like to our students or the younger generation, it's going to cause a bit of confusion. So what can we do with the educational system now to actually to cancel that out? And I think like we do it at 100 Black Men, where we get it's called audience of our children. Now we get all the students in, and we get all their parents in. One's on one side, the parents are on another side, and we literally create a platform for them to talk so they can get a better understanding. Now, if we can implement this within the educational system, like there'll be a better understanding of about our students. because again, it causes confusion. I don't know if you agree with that or not. But then again, when you think about the, I'm saying, because my mom said you have to do this, you have to get A's, you have to get me. Like, mom, it's different now. I know she's on here, but like,
no, but you're speaking
Yeah,
facts.
I mean, just
you have to think about it. Like, remember, you have to get A's, you have to get B's. But mom, it's different now. Do you know what I'm saying? So like the different generations of thinking is going to be confusing. Now with this society, that's confusing. Other things are confusing. Your parents are telling you this. You know what I'm saying? So what can we do as to create a platform for our, like, for maybe the teachers, the parents, to actually speak and get it out, so you can have a better understanding on what your common goal, what your vision is.
I mean, and yeah, just to interject, it's probably one of the works why I guess I was hired as one of the ambassadors for Notting Hill Carnival. So being an artist, my role is to go into the educational establishment and teaching them about culture, the importance of carnival culture. You know what I mean? And I think a lot of these kids as well, they need to know their culture, their historical background, where they come from. That is good to be where you come from and be proud. You know, I think when you connect with these young people on that level and them know, look, you're from Africa, it's cool to be from Africa. You're from the Caribbean, it's cool. You don't need to conform to be anything else. You can see a drastic change in them. So for me, one of the changes that does help is to allow them to understand where they come from. Teach them about culture, teach them about carnival. Some people concept and understanding of carnival is about going and just whining girls with scandal, but they don't understand the history of the music, calypso, soca music, how rich in culture it is. Even in reggae, you know, Afrobeats, it's so rich in culture that when you dance into it, the reason why you dance and why you connect it is because it's something, that deeper than the mind could understand. You know what I mean? So that's another way, another outlet of, you know, trying to develop these kids' minds. You know, yeah. Sorry.
Let me
jump in.
Who's next? Go on.
I was going to answer your question, Karen. No, because I was saying like mandatory schooling was popularized by people like Hitler and John Cotton, who was like a famous religious figure, but also in colonial times. And these are the people who were promoting this mode of education. I think that instead of having a top-down approach where some corporation tells the government what they want people to be learning, the government creates the thing and passes it down, we need to look at education on a community level, because the needs of each community are different. And us as a Black community, especially in the UK, we don't get to learn a lot about where we come from. I've been fortunate enough to live in Barbados, to live in London, and my family's from Africa. So I feel like I have quite a good transatlantic connection. But majority of the things that I've learned about our history has been in the last, since Corona, since lockdown, since George Floyd. Like, I've been obsessed with actually figuring out what is going on. And there are people out there that are willing to deliver the education, but then they have to be careful. The same way some teachers are fearful. I know a teacher that got fired because he started bringing Bob Marley into our literature classes to teach us about his form of poetry, his art, and he got fired. So people are kind of scared. Martin Luther King, I mean, the list of people that they've killed because they tried to educate us is so long that we don't have time to get into it. So I think as families first, we need to start talking about the education, talking about where we're going to go, how we're going to seek it out. I'm not saying you need to take your child out of school. Actually, I'm saying that you should definitely do that. But if you have a 9 to 5, it might not be feasible. It might not be feasible. But there's CSEP, which is a Saturday school, and they have Robin Walker, who is the Black history guy. There's none like him. They had a caller down speaking to the students. I mean, these are real powerhouses. And there's small efforts like that. You guys with 100 Black men. I mean, Trini, like, everybody's doing their thing. We just need to seek it out. And I've made it my mission to try and collate a list. I know someone asked, is there a directory for these things? It's coming, okay?
Yeah, well, I mean,
lists, so we need to collate it.
Go on there.
But let's not also forget that if you're talking about specifically during the period of, let's say, the sort of like 70s to 90s, going into the early 2000s, when it was a lot stronger, that movement of supplementary schools. The National Association of Black Supplementary Schools still exists. NABS still exists as an organization. So if we want to seek an organization that has a network of a lot of these supplementary organizations, that NABS still exists. They have their big, you know, gala every year to celebrate all the work that all these organizations have been doing. So we can hopefully, assuming that they're still, their network's still as integrated as we'd hope it is, that's still there. But there are a few things that all of you lot have said that I'm sitting here just buzzing. Like, you lot, I literally feel like I'm a fizzy drinker. You lot are shaking me up right now. Like, that's crazy. But literally, yeah. Like, so speaking to, okay, cool. Starting with yourself, Rihanna, because you put together the 7 points, yeah, from before. And I think there are two particular points that have been spoken to quite significantly, and I've got them here: indifference and provisional self-esteem. Yeah. So based on, yeah, what John Taylor Gatto was saying, within indifference, he effectively, the way I receive that is that young people become apathetic. They start to sort of just not really care about much. Do you know what I mean? It's kind of like that thing of, and I'm sure I was a culprit of this when I was younger, how was your day? Yeah, that's right. Do you know what I mean? I'm not excited about anything. Do you get what I'm saying? I'm just like, do you know what I mean? Because the education didn't do anything to stimulate or excite me or make me think I should be compelled to be engaged with this. But then the other thing around provisional self-esteem, which is effectively that it is scary for our government and our society to have young people who are passionate and walk in line with their own purpose, because then they start questioning everything. But guess what? We don't care about whether you're scared of them questioning or not. We want children that's going to question everything. We want children that's going to come out and change what's here. The mission of Revolution Hive, I always say externally, is to equip young people for life beyond the classroom. But internally, what we say is, we need some social revolutionaries. That's what we're actually trying to produce. You know what I'm saying? But we just don't say that externally too tough, innit? Because when we used to say that when we were first starting, schools would look at us and be like, yeah, we're all right, you know, we don't think we really need your services. But when we say equip them for life beyond the classroom, they're like, oh, so no, what's that? But anyway, so that's that. That's the 2 points I wanted to address quickly that you said, Rihanna. Trini, you said that you need to young people to understand their culture because it does something for them. And I can tell you from first-hand experience, we were delivering a program at the back end of last year, which I was grateful to have led on. And it was with a school in Sutton. I'm sure the school won't mind me saying. It was with Carshalton Boys Sports College. So they're a secondary school. They have a sixth form attached to them, boys school. And they brought us in because they had a group of about 40 year 10 boys who they felt were underachieving academically. They were displaying a lot of traits of toxic masculinity. And they were also kind of just not caring. Do you know what I mean? But they were influential amongst their peers. And it was a 6-week program, but one particular session. So I did 1 week where we focused on effectively like the culture that you don't have a choice about. You've been born into a culture, and then the culture that you choose. But the culture that you're born into, I was starting to talk a little bit about sort of like, you know, sort of like lad culture. But then I wanted to go into like every single person in the room. Tell me where you're from. Tell me like, what are you proud of? Suddenly youths that were from like Turkey and that were saying, yeah, man, like, you know, my family were military, and, you know, like, I know not everybody agrees with war, but it does give me a sense of kind of like national pride. And then you had the youth over there who'd never really spoken before, who said, right, like, you know, I'm from Barbados, innit? Like, and I did this thing where at the start of the I know, but I did this thing where on purpose at the start of the session, I played clips from songs from so many different cultures. So man played Oasis, Wonderwall, and all the English youths, yeah, maybe, you know what I'm saying? And then you got man played Crossfire, Pump Me Up, and one youth that's Bayesian's like, oh, he's like, that's my family, like family get-togethers. Then you got a next youth when man played a tune from the next island's like, rah, like that's, and then I played some Indian tune, and all the little youths like Indian are like, rah, like, and so then now you see the pride that's come out, and suddenly now they start building connections and bonds, and you see youths. There was a point in the session where I swear to you, I could not have asked for more, where one youth who was from Pakistan, I think it was, I'm going to probably get this wrong, but I'm hoping I'm right. One youth from Pakistan and a youth from India were kind of joking with each other. Then it started to get a bit serious. And the youth from Pakistan just went, hey, yo, hold on, bro. I'm Pakistani and you're Indian. We shouldn't fight because our countries already have enough issues. So why are we adding to it? I said, my job here is done. I said, nah, if that's what understanding your culture can make you do, make you go, rah, like, our countries have issues. Why are we having issues? it just tells me that this is so significant. When Trini said that thing about culture, I see it firsthand, because it's true. When people are able to take pride in where they're from, what made them who they are, all of that, it gets real. And then Kieran, when you were speaking about the fact, and it kind of ties into what Rihanna said about top down, bottom up, but when you were speaking about audience with our children and allowing the young people to have that voice, it's significant, because I was really thinking about it recently. Like, I'm waiting for the school that's willing to own up to saying, why do we even exist? Do we exist to get young people to fit into our machine, or do we exist to nurture a generation of students that are going to transform the society we live in? Because if you're willing to nurture a generation that transforms society, then you have to start with, what do you guys think is important in the world? But that goes to what you were saying, Kieran, which is being able to have their voice be not only just as, but if not more significant than the teachers. That's actually got to come up. There has to come a point where that's the reality, because effectively we're living in a time where young people have their own views on the world. They've got these smartphones Rihanna spoke about, where they're seeing things and they're sitting in the class looking at their teacher like, big man, this don't align with what I saw on YouTube yesterday. You know? So I'm starting to question.
Waffling. Why would they say waffling?
Yeah, they're looking at you like, big man, you're waffling, because when...
Oh dear.
Oh no, that is
I do want to touch on the point that
I was watching Chunks and Philly on YouTube yesterday. They're saying what they were saying in it. Do you get what I'm saying? Oh, did you lose me?
Lewis.
You lost
we got you back. We got you back, but we lost Trini.
Okay, cool. Yeah, okay, cool. But yeah, so effectively what I was saying is just that, yeah, we have to take into account the fact that these young people need to be given just as much stake in being able to transform what exists. You know, I was grateful that I'm doing an African leadership course at the moment with the Center for Pan-African Thought, and yesterday's lecture was on Kwame Nkrumah, right? And I didn't realize that a significant part of Kwame Nkrumah's approach to Pan-Africanism was he set up something called the Young Pioneers Movement. When I heard that, and he started teaching us about the Young Pioneers Movement, I said, that's the key, fam. That's the key. But people are scared of that youth spirit and how they can transform. So it's interesting. But yeah, sorry, I just got excited when all of you were talking.
5 minutes, Kieran, because then we have to start summarizing.
I'm going to be quick. It's like, I think Trini touched upon it about our culture as well. And I think within the educational system, like I think a lot of kids, if not all kids, have a Eurocentric view of the world. Now, for example, how I can explain it in layman terms is like, you know, I watched something the other day about Egypt and about the hieroglyphics and anything like that. And Nefertiti, if you see the statue of Nefertiti, what they're portraying now, she looks white. Look, no, let's be real. And I'm thinking, like, is this what's going on? So when I was in school now, all that, no disrespect, all I learned about was Rosa Parks and Martin Luther King. And I think there's a significant reason why that is. Martin Luther King is, you hit me, but I'm not going to hit back. That's what they want to portray. And Rosa Parks, okay, yeah, she was tired. She at the back of the bus. She didn't want to get up. Cool, I understand that. That's cool. But why did we learn about Mansa Musa? Why didn't we learn about Marcus Garvey? Why did we learn about all these other characters, or sorry, not characters, all these other people that actually have a significant role within Black history? Why is it only Martin Luther King and then Miss Slaves? You know what I'm saying? So we know what we really actually need to educate our children at home.
White supremacy, bro. That's white supremacy. That's what the white supremacy system does. So, like, obviously, when you have to understand, Martin Luther King's tactic worked in that time because it was marketing. He was doing non-violence for the sake of bringing to the attention to the masses the fact that the oppressor was so uncivilized that they were willing to aggressively beat, hose, all of that stuff, people who were not even fighting them. But the reason for that was just to bring that to people's awareness visually. But actually, the overall strategy was the economic downturn, which was, big man, we are not getting on your bus. We're not getting on your bus. 381 days, you will not see our dollar on this bus for 381 days. How about that? Do you get what I'm saying?
And so it's so funny because as much as they love him, they still killed him. I know they tried to blame it on other things, but that's just as they do. And it's a pattern. But at the core of it, our education, like, we all know that young people are the future. And their education is so important. It is for parents to stop assuming that teachers know what they're doing, because sometimes the system is so ingrained in the schooling that the teacher is completely oblivious as to what they're actually delivering to your child. And on top of that, we now have to go and seek out curriculum that is culturally suitable for our children. There's a great channel on YouTube called Home Team History. And I say it's great for kids because they don't throw too much of their political views in the way that some of the other channels do. They just give you facts about Black history, and Black history did not start with slavery. There's some people, do you know, I found out recently that Beethoven was Black.
Yeah.
Do you think it's a surprise that there are no photos of the fact that he was, I think he was mixed race, but we'll own him as Black? That's crazy to me. And there's so many inventions that we're using and no one actually knows who's creating them. And the truth of the matter is, if society would let Black people be great, we'd be functioning at a much higher level.
Of course.
Like the entire society is only going to benefit from freeing the minds of young people.
Well, this is what's interesting, because sometimes I just ask myself, are we fighting a battle we don't need to fight because we're still in a country that's not ours? And
I'm
sometimes
leaving.
I think, I'm
leaving. I'm waiting for Corona to fully, like, I'm gonna book a ticket. I change country all the time anyway, but this one, I'm done. I'm out.
Well, this is what I'm getting at. So that is my question, because effectively, when we talk about changing the education system here, which, don't get me wrong, I'd be a hypocrite to say that we shouldn't bother with that, because why else do I exist then? Revolution Hive exists to transform the education sector and try and do that. But I'm also aware of the fact that if we're going to talk about it specifically from the context of transforming it for the purposes of Black people, and I feel we land, you know. So therefore, we have to appreciate the fact that maybe more of our focus should be on trying to ensure that the Eurocentric nature of education that still exists to some extent on the continent is where the fight should lie, and therefore trying to get rid of that issue. Do you understand? Because we're now at a point where I think there's elements of Pan-Africanism that's very much in place amongst the masses, and now it's dealing with the political leaders, which is sometimes the biggest challenge. But let me not go too off topic. But I agree with what you said there around being able to, you know, remove that element around the curriculum being so Eurocentric, you know, hence why I'm a massive supporter for what the Black Curriculum, you know, that's an organization and a campaign that exists. The Black Curriculum, what they're doing is great. They're trying to basically say, nah, bruv, like, we're not following your Eurocentric curriculum anymore. We're not dealing with this. You get what I'm saying? Because young people need to be able to see that. I mean, we have a couple of sessions in Revolution Hive that are alternative world history, but nothing as comprehensive as what the Black Curriculum are doing. So that's why I want to give them all the plaudits. You get what I'm saying? And I haven't personally met anyone from there yet. But from what I've heard from, funnily enough, I actually first heard about them through the Association of Colleges. And this is an organization run by middle-class white people who blatantly said to me, we want to find a way for the Black Curriculum to be in all of the colleges that are in our membership. And I thought to myself, well, if they're managing to convince these people already, then Black Curriculum, you're doing your thing. Keep that. How can I help? Do you know what I mean? But yeah, from a historical standpoint, that's important. And then you layer it with the understanding of self in terms of self-mastery. So Kieran always talks about, you know, I love it when Kieran says my perception's determined by my reality. And he talks about the importance of being able to think. When you start teaching young people that, now you come up with young people that are completely different. And I'm grateful for some of the mentees that we've had through the 100 here. And some of these mentees we've had through the 100, because of the fact we've been able to help nurture their mind. Yo, the way they move now, I'll be honest, I have richer conversations with some of my mentees than I have with some people older than me, you know. Richer conversations. Like, I'm talking like one of them who used to come check me in the office like every week. And it got to the point where he felt so comfortable in himself. He'd walk in the office, he wouldn't even sign in, bro. He'll just walk in the office, can I get a hot chocolate, please? And then I'll be sitting there doing my work. I'm obviously co-working space. And he'll just pull up next to me with the hot chocolate in his hand. I'll be like, big man, when did you get here? He'll be like, oh, just now. I'm like, you did all that before you sat down? He's like, yeah. And anyway, he'll be like, anyway, so like, what's your goals in the next 5 years, Lewis? I'll be like, stop it, you're 13. 13 years old. I'll ask you for my goals in the next 5 years.
Lewis, honestly, what you said about teaching people how to think, it's something that we used to do. We used to learn how to think. People, if you look at a child learning to walk, you're not telling them, okay, right foot, left. You're not doing that. They have a desire to go somewhere. And so they develop the ability to walk. You can encourage them. And that's the kind of approach we need to take to education. I think Edward de Bono has a book called Teach Your Child How to Think. Every single parent needs to read that. because there's different ways that children think. All of them are different, and there's different methods that apply to different situations. So I think it's really on us to educate ourselves so that we can be mindful of how we're educating them. But to summarize,
sorry. I know. How much minutes do we have left?
Oh, I was just going to say this one sentence and then you can go.
Okay, go on.
So I think more experiences like Richard Branson's adventure to finding his way home, so that children aren't scared to experience new things, because in the classroom setting, when you learn something new or you try to answer a new question, usually if you get it wrong, you get ridiculed, and that's enough to stop someone from wanting to do that. I think community service, actually getting children involved with the older generations so that they understand where we've come from as a people and where they're going in life, because there's a lot to learn from. But no, we separate the old people, we keep them in homes, we keep the working people in 9 to 5s or 2 times the jobs, and between homework and TV, school, there's no time for us to really nurture our children. So I think making more of a community effort as well, and then giving children privacy and solitude. Because it's so do this, do that, do this, do that, they're not able to start to think for themselves about, what do I actually want to do? How can I actually engage my mind and develop their personality, essentially? I don't think that another one of John Taylor Gatto's points was surveillance. It's the last one of the 7 lessons, that teachers are constantly watching over children to teach them that we can see everything that you're doing. So don't you dare try and do something naughty, which they take into the workplace, they take into, we don't even care that one person owns majority of the information on the internet and sells it to the government. It's been outed, and some of us are on Facebook Live right now.
Do you know, I think just to touch on what both of you guys have said, it's like about thinking. I'm so on the mind, like as I said to Lewis, we had a long conversation the other day. Like, your reality, your world is exactly what you perceive it to be. So if you perceive it to be negative, your world, your environment is going to be negative. But if you see it to be positive, that's what it is. And I think within the younger generation, thinking is actually a lost art, because thinking is actually an art to have. And I know I say it all the time. I think Lewis hears me say it all the time. You have to master your mind, or you're going to have your master's mind. It's literally as simple as that. And don't be conformed to society as well, because at the end of the day, when you're talking about personalities and character, a lot of people, even our age now, you're building up a character or personality that is not yourself. So therefore, you're confusing who you are, because now in different environments, you built a character to be that person. Then you built a character to be that person. Like, who are you? You have to have that introspection. Say, you know, what do I like and what do I like? Like, what do I love doing? And even if our habitual patterns as well, like, are they truly ours? What I like, do I actually like it, or am I conformed to society? Why do you have the introspection in yourself? And you know what, you're free. Because I think you actually, a lot of the younger generation is conformed to society. I have to buy this, I have to act this way, I have to, for who? And I think it's fear, and fear provides the inability to move forward. And a lot of them are being fearful to be themselves. So as you said, they just need to think for themselves and be themselves, and they'll be all right.
Free ourselves from mental slavery.
There we go.
Come on. Finish on that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, guys, thank you so much. This has been a great conversation. It's always fun. I think next time we'll touch on more Pan-Africanism and maybe going back and seeing what's actually going on in Africa presently, and how we can stop France from stealing 500 million billion a year.
Come on. We need to have a conversation.
Yeah, that's the next show still.
Oh, guys, amazing. Thank you so much.
Right. See you later.
Thank you, family. Much love.
Hope you enjoyed it. Like, see you later.
Much love.